beautiful people, welcome to another video. In this video I'm going to be talking about how to get good grades in an accelerated course. I guess more specifically how I get good grades in accelerated courses as someone with a full-time job. So really quickly I'm just going to show you, so I'm not lying. In each of the courses I've taken so far, I've gotten pretty much a 90 or above. I would say my average is about a 95 per class. I am a biological sciences major. I currently go to school online, and I will say as a disclaimer, this is my final year of school. I've talked about my non-traditional kind of journey through undergrad. So anyone who's watched that video knows that this is my final year after several years out of school. But this degree, this program, follows kind of what I would have done if this was my fourth year at my original school, in that it's basically mostly electives and a few core classes. Like at this point I'm doing the classes that I need to graduate from this particular school, so they're not all core classes. Core classes, I feel like I would give slightly different advice than what I'm going to be giving in this video. However, at this point, just know that I'm coming from a point of being in my final semester, being in my final half of my semester, and just doing everything I can to graduate at this point. So at this point, like, grades aren't super crucial for me. So the way that I approach things might be a little different from someone who's in like their first or second year of school, especially if your GPA is really important to you. I do have a 4.1 GPA, so I am doing rather good at this point. But yeah, me being an online student and having classes that aren't necessarily easier but are a little bit less core to my major might play a role in me getting good grades, if that makes sense. So with that being said, let's get into the video, get into the tips, get into what I have to share. So I did write down some things, and basically I'm filming this before the second half of my semester. I've explained before, I go to school at ASU, Arizona State University. This is my final semester in the spring, and it's also the second half of my semester. So our semester is broken into two separate 7.5-week courses, 7.5-week periods, and within those periods we take 3 to 4 classes in each. 3 is kind of the maximum you can take, but I requested to take more last session, and then this session I'm taking 3 classes. By the time you guys see this, it will be April. I am filming this in March, but next week I will be starting classes, so you may see a few more videos come out after this about my kind of journey through my classes and showing a more detailed process of how I study or how I do things. But for right now, this is me after 3 sessions, 2 semesters of what I do. So I will say, when I first started this like accelerated course system, I was very put off by it. It was very hard to kind of find my bearing. I felt like I was always behind. However, at this point, after 3 sessions, I've gotten into a rhythm of what to do and how to do things. I'm also grateful for it because I plan on applying to an accelerated nursing program, and this seems like pretty good practice for that system, because I've heard online that someone who had a similar 12-month program had an exam every week, and I can relate to that. So what do I do? So the first week of classes is pretty much going to be the most chaotic. It's going to be the most intense. You're going to have to kind of figure out how each class operates, how each professor operates, what each class requires from you, but use that week wisely. If you have access to your materials beforehand, try to get a head start. If you have access to like the textbooks or the learning programs or whatever it is beforehand, even if you have like Canvas like I do, and the teacher opens it up the weekend before, try to use that time to kind of go through the syllabus, get those easy preliminary things done. I don't know if any other school does this, but usually all my classes have that first week like syllabus quiz, introductory discussions, easy things that kind of get you into the rhythm of the class and get you kind of attuned with some of the ways that the assignments work, while also just giving you a head start. And then other professors might actually have a few assignments due that first week. So you want to get in as early as possible, look at your syllabus, look at your how your course is laid out. If you have access to see like all the assignments that are going to be due that for the session or the semester, make sure that you are aware of when those big major things are happening, like exams or quizzes. Find out if they are proctored or open book. Find out the formats of things early on so that you aren't caught off guard later on. So with looking at the syllabus, I don't know if any other program does this, but with Canvas, you have a to-do list section in the app, as well as a dashboard online that you can access where it shows you every single task for every single class. I think you have to just choose your classes, choose which ones are your favorites. For some reason, my school keeps all my classes that I've ever taken in my Canvas. So what I do I guess I don't really mind showing you. So I kind of use the color overlay to gray out all the classes I've taken so far. Of course, it clicks into something when I'm showing something, but I gray out all my old classes so that I can easily distinguish them. Right now I have nothing favorited, so I'm seeing all my classes on my home screen. And then once my classes start next week, I will star each of them so they only show up, and then I'll assign a color to each one just to distinguish them. And then what I've also done is I synced the Canvas calendar to my own iCloud calendar, so I get notifications about when things are due. Honestly, I don't pay attention to it as much because I am focused on the to-do list on Canvas. I look at that thing religiously, like every single day, and I also make sure I get email notifications. I make sure, you know, I get any for any discussion groups or programs, I make sure I get notified when I'm responded to so I can respond back if that's part of the assignment, whatever it may be. So make sure you're setting up all those like notification systems early on in the semester, that first week. Like I said, if you don't have access to these kind of tools, then you would have to go in manually into your own calendar or planner and put in those dates, like, to make sure that you're notified. Personally, for me, I don't do well with paper planners. I always start them, never finish them, get really into the idea of like designing things and color coordinating things, and then I never look at it again. That's just me. So I find that a digital system works the best for me. A digital calendar works best for me. I try not to overload it with a bunch of different things, but for me, I create, I have iCloud, so I create different categories in my iCloud, and I have one that's labeled school. So my Canvas, I have two school calendars. My Canvas one syncs to my iCloud. I see all my events in there when things are due. And then I have a second one of like overall school deadlines, like semester opening or graduation date, or have this done for the university by the state. And that's just a system that works for me. I use a to-do list on Canvas as my to-do list. I don't really create anything else. I might set reminders on my phone if I really need to. I might have like a paper journal where if I'm at my desk, I'll write everything down in a paper notebook so I can see it right in front of me, and I don't go off track. So I'm telling you basically to create your systems that first week for every class to make sure that you know what's going on. I was a bit puzzled because there was one particular class where we were told the average of like for each exam, and it was baffling to me the number of times like this proportion of students got an A, this proportion of students got a B, this proportion of students got a D or lower, mainly because they didn't submit anything. And I found that a little baffling because you should have all the tools available to you to communicate with your professor, to you know all the dates and have all those deadlines. And I just was kind of confused by that because I couldn't imagine ever missing a due date because I'm so religious about checking my dates every time, especially when things get changed. Usually I'll see the email first or I'll see the Canvas notification, but some way, somehow I'm always getting a notification about announcements. I'm making sure that, you know, I'm reading announcements, even if skimming it briefly in the time that I have, just to see if it's important, to see if it's relevant to me. But that is the major part. You want to create a system early on that works, that notifies you, and that keeps you up to date, and helps you stay up to date with all your assignments. Yes, so the other part is to recognize how much each course requires from you. I kind of talked about this, I think, in my non-traditional course video, but recognize how much work you really need to put in. And again, this goes into that disclaimer of if it's a core class, you might want to put a lot more effort in, versus if it's an elective class. But if you, okay, so I had 4 online classes last semester, or last session, and the way that ASU calculates the time that you need to work on it, I think it's about like 16 hours per week per class or something of that nature. It might not be that high. It might be higher actually, but basically they expect you to have a certain amount of time each week that you're spending on each class, and then they multiply that by each class you're working on. So I had 4 classes, that would be 64 hours in a week. I work 40 hours a week, sometimes more if I do overtime, so that's not feasible whatsoever. The classes that I had last semester all had textbooks or readings, and with a lot of the history classes I've taken, my readings can go anywhere from 50 to 100 or more pages, especially if it's multiple different like journals or PDFs that we have to read, and you know, textbook readings that are chapters long. And I started out trying to take textbook notes for every single class because I got into this place where I really want to like try to be really good of a student and take handwritten notes and have everything collected in a binder, and I started that way, and I found that it was taking way too much time. I wasn't finishing anything on time, or if I did, it was because I finally put down the pen and I was like, I'm not gonna get this done. Eventually I switched over to typing notes, which for me still isn't that quick because I'm not the best typer, so sometimes I would have a lot of like red underlines, and then I get psyched out by that, so I go and fix them, and that takes time, right? So eventually I just found a balance of when I needed to take notes versus not. The classes I had were cell biology, which had a textbook module, but the textbook wasn't actually required. Like, I went back into the syllabus to see if I actually needed to read the textbook, and it really wasn't a required thing. It's there for a supplemental aid. Like, if you didn't understand the lecture, then you could go back and read the textbook. And so what I started to do after the first exam was I would just listen to the lecture videos, and they also provided like supplementary lecture videos. But in the lecture videos, I listened to those multiple times, and I would write on the PowerPoint slides, and that's what I did for that class. So I cut out textbook readings altogether because I found I was taking notes on things I already knew. I mean, it's cell biology, I'm a biology major. Cell bio, I pretty much learned most of that in like my first bio class several years ago. It only started getting a little more in-depth later on, and that's when, again, I just focused on my notes and the lectures. I also had American Health Institutions, which was kind of like a history class. Like, it was a government systems class that explained how the government works. We read the Constitution. We had to kind of understand what branches of government were influential in creating legislative things and different health-related acts throughout history. And that class also had a lot of readings and discussions, and those were the two major things. With the discussions, you had two sets of discussions each week. One set was to annotate the readings that we got through a program, and then the other was to create a discussion, like answer the questions, do a little bit of research, and just try to find what we were studying and incorporate it into this news article or something. Again, that class I started off trying to read everything, and I quickly found out I really don't have to. I started reading just to answer the questions, and again, because this was an elective class, it wasn't super important to read the entire document, and as long as I got the general idea from it to answer the questions that I needed to, that's all that really mattered. And I found that I don't think they really expected us to read the entire document anyway. I noticed that when they said to annotate a specific thing, they would tell you what sets of pages to find it on. So in other cases, I would also just speed read and just, annotate the document. I imported it into GoodNotes, I annotated it, and I would just make notes along the way, and then by the time it came time to answer it, I would answer it, or I would have it open, the assignment open, read the question, start reading the document. Once I find the answer the question, move on to the next one. So you really have to be strategic about what you're doing, especially if you're someone who doesn't have a lot of time. You want to make sure that you're using your time effectively. You want to make sure that you're prioritizing things properly. Again, I spoke about this in another video, but I would prioritize things by due dates. I would prioritize by the length of time that it would take. So if something was going to take me 10 minutes and I had 10 minutes, I was going to do that thing right away. My nutrition class was mainly textbook readings and exams and assignments. With the textbook readings, I just read the textbook. I didn't take any notes after like the first module, and I would just read it, and then the exam itself was open book. So again, I also found that a lot of the exam questions weren't going to be things I would have taken notes on, because they were very focused on like the tables and the diagrams that you wouldn't have really put into your notes unless you were screenshotting entire pages of the textbook. So that's mainly why I stopped writing notes for it, because there's no way I would have found this in my regular notes if I had taken notes. So I would just have my iPad open onto the textbook and have the exam open, and that's how I did that. The assignments themselves, there would be maybe 7 or 8 per module, but they were also really quick. So we had case studies, and we had like little mini assignments. After the first module, where we had to like set up certain assignments, it was really easy to just go into the textbook website. It wasn't the textbook itself, but it was like learning modules you would go into, and like the case studies would take maybe 10 minutes. It was like 5 or 6 questions per each one, and we would just have to look at a PDF, find something, answer stuff. The other assignments, again, after setting up the initial assignment in module 1, I just used the same information from there, used it in every single module after that. So that was an easy way to just get the grade and do well in that class. The other class I had was Intro to Africana Studies, which was a class that focused on the transatlantic slave trade and helped us to really understand the way that slavery affected the continent of Africa, how it affects blacks now who are trying to reconnect with their African roots. There were 2 books that we had to read in that class, and then several videos and movies and things like that. With that class, for the smaller videos, again, those were pretty quick. It was like videos and then discussions, or whatever, reading and then a discussion. The books probably took the longest time to do. And with what they provided for us was like a free PDF that we could access from a specific app on our computers. Eventually I just ended up buying the books because it was like I wasn't going to be able to bring my laptop with me. It wasn't really available on my iPad, so I downloaded the books on my books app on my iPhone, and I would just read whenever I had time. So I have my iPhone at work. I can just read it either maybe as I'm waiting for the bus, on the bus, before work starts. I get there early, during my break, you know, at an off moment where I don't have a room to do. So all those things just made it more accessible, and that's actually something else I had written down. With being strategic, try to have ways to access your materials that make it easier for you to transport it or bring it around with you. So if you have maybe a physical textbook, try to get an online version that you can access from your phone or an iPad, or something that you can carry with you. If you have books that you're supposed to read and you don't mind buying it and you're able to access buying it or downloading a PDF and having the Good Notes app on your phone or something, whatever it is, do that so that, you know, there isn't an accessibility issue for you. You don't have to wait until you have your computer or your laptop with you to be able to work on assignments. I work at a hospital, and I've seen plenty of like nursing students have their iPad with them. Mind you, it is at night, but they're able to access their notes when there's some downtime between patients or between activities. So yeah, try to find out, like, do you need to do readings? Do you need to access every single supplemental thing, or is there kind of just merit in just watching the video lecture or just reading the notes that they provide? Do you even have to watch a lecture? Is it possible to get all the information you need just from reading through the PowerPoint slides? So find out in that second week range what is going to help you succeed in that class. You can pretty much figure out very quickly, probably by your first exam, your first quiz even, what it is that you need to do, like how much effort you really need to put into the class. I think after the first exam for nutrition, like I said, once I realized how like specific the questions were and that some of the things couldn't be found in my notes and I had to open the textbook anyway, I was like, you know what, I'm just not gonna take notes, because if you need me to have the textbook open, I might as well just have the textbook open. The other class I had was cell biology. Cell biology wasn't an open book class, it was a proctored exam class. We had quizzes and then we had exams. And with that class, like I said, I ended up just watching the lectures multiple times. I kind of created like this auditory learning system with that class, some visual things, and just repetition was my way to get the information in. And we had the option to create study sheets. I've already put it away, I don't feel like grabbing it, but I basically created like full canvas front and back pages of notes, writing really tiny, putting diagrams in, drawing things in that made the information easy to access. And again, I did well in that class. I did also cram for that class. A lot of the times the exams would open on a Monday and I would be studying Saturday, Sunday. Like I watched the lectures initially to do the quizzes, and then when the exam came around the second week, then I would go back and listen and watch and really actually look at all the material again. And that's what worked for me. I can't say that it's like healthy or it's good to do that, but it's what worked for me. So use multiple devices where you have the ability to use your time wisely. This may not be a fan favorite, but I brought my school to work with me. I brought, you know, my assignments to work with me. I would do anything before work started or after work, of course, while I was on break. Some days I just didn't have the mental energy to deal with that. Like work was so either busy or rough that I needed my break to be a break. But some other days I would just have my, like especially on the weekends. The weekends are particularly slow. There really aren't surgeries or anything happening. Discharges are pretty frequent, usually on Sundays, but there's more off time in the evening, so I would bring like my laptop with me and my iPad with me, and I'd be able to sit down a lot of times and just do like crunch out a lot of work. So if you have the capacity to do that, that's also great. If you have access to like your lectures in an auditory way or an audio format, like on Canvas, if you have the video playing, you can usually listen to it from your phone. You can't turn off your phone usually, but even just having my headphones in, having my phone like on, open, unlocked, and just playing it while I did stuff was also a good way to take in the lectures. But if it's something that like you need to see what's on the slide, it may not be super helpful, but it's still something to take into account. For essays, this might seem a little weird, but answer the question first. So I have a way of writing essays most of the time, especially now that I've gotten older. Before, like in high school and stuff, I would write very like poetically, and I would use very extended metaphors. I would write in a very flowery way, and it really worked well for me in high school. I got amazing grades because of my creativity. But in college, especially after taking like scientific writing and different classes that were just geared and focused for scientific research writing, I just realized it wasn't worth it to try to be super creative a lot of the times, especially if you have a word limit, if you have to reach a word count. You just have to find a way to answer the question right away. So the way that I write essays most of the time is to create an outline, and I just focus on answering the question directly from the question. I feel like this is like elementary school thing, like going back to elementary school, and it's like, what does the question say, and answer that directly. If you had to answer it in 1 or 2 sentences, answer it. That's your thesis statement essentially, and then adding the fluff around that afterwards. So if you're supposed to write like a 2-page essay, you answer the question, then you break that answer down into like 2 or 3 paragraphs. Your intro and your conclusion are basically fluff. The intro and the conclusion mirror each other pretty much. And you just answer the question in both of those. Your introduction is introducing the person to the solution or the answer that you're giving, and then the conclusion is restating what you've just shared in your arguments and saying why it matters, right? And then adding evidence and things as needed in the body paragraphs. And it might sound super simplistic, but it's really the most analytical way I can think of to like get to the point, because even when you maybe walk away from that essay, maybe it's not due right away, maybe it's due at the end of the week, maybe you have other things to do, but you just answering the question, setting up your paragraphs with like each bullet point being your paragraph like thesis, and answering that, having that those bullet points and that outline prepared already makes it so much easier when you get back to it, and then you just create your paragraph around that. And I personally just find it really easy to form an essay after that, even especially as someone who is very, like, I have to be intrinsically motivated for things to get done, that being able to come and see the low effort outline there for me, the answer is already there, all I have to do is shape it a little bit, that makes me more motivated to actually do an essay, especially when I don't want to write it. So creating bullet points or checklists for your essays and answering the question right away, or if you're not able to answer the question right away, at least forming some kind of plan in a bulleted format that tells you what you're going to do first. Like, create a checklist out of it, right? First, let me see if I can, I don't know if I'll be able to access a one of my classes. So I had to take English again, which was kind of annoying because I AP tested out of English in college originally, and then I was expected to take it all over again, which was really frustrating. But let me see if I can just show you a module. So basically, in the way that some of my professors shape their modules, in their assignments, they have like, first do this, then do this, then do this. I think my English 102 is the best show of this, because the way that he set it up was that each assignment, he would tell you what to do. Like, I really got to a point where I was like, I don't have to think so hard because everything is written for me. I don't know if this is going to show on the camera, but he has like instructions. Step 1, revise project. Step 2, review project guideline. Step 3, evaluate your revision process. This is like our final assignment, and just break those tasks or the parts of the essay or whatever into tasks and do it as a task-based assignment, and just mark off the task when you're done. If you have to research, maybe you gather all your materials first, then you create your reference sheet as you're doing that, because trying to find references after the fact is really annoying, and then you start writing your essay with that outline that you've already made. Make it as easy as possible, make it as quick as possible, that if you're interrupted or you come back or you're not able to do it in one single consistent step, that each time you can just get started right away without having to overcome a hurdle of like getting your brain into that space of focusing, for example. Work when motivation strikes. So like I said, I'm very intrinsically motivated and extrinsically motivated, and when you're working full-time or you're working multiple jobs, you are quite literally restricted by your time, not the time that the university thinks that you are going to have, it's by the amount of time you actually have. So right, I work 40 hours a week, I work 3 to 11:30, 5 days a week, I have 2 days off consistently, like consecutively. I make sure that the course or the assignments that are going to take me the longest time I do on my days off, and then the assignments that, and I try to start a majority of my assignments as early as possible. I don't like doing things the day of, if I can help it. I don't like submitting things the day and the time they're due. I want to have it done like a day or two early, a week early if I can. So I go by due dates. I go by their due dates a lot of times, and then I go by my due dates. So if I have 4 assignments due this week, one's due on Monday, the other's due on Wednesday, the other's due on Friday, the other is due on Sunday, I'm going to do the one that's due on Monday first. However, if I have 2 assignments due on the same day, Monday, that's now 2 things I have to focus on from like Friday the previous week through the weekend to Monday. So now it's like, okay, what can I work on as soon as possible to get this done even before Saturday? And between those 2 assignments due on Monday, which one is going to get done quickest? Which can I do, knock it out really quickly? Okay, this one requires me to watch a 1-hour movie and do a 7-sentence discussion. The 7-sentence discussion part is going to be super quick and easy. The 1-hour video, that's 1 hour of my time. Okay, the other one requires me to watch maybe 2 lecture videos that are each 45 minutes each, and then I have to do a 10-question quiz. Which of those am I going to do first? And that's kind of how I break that down. So the 1-hour one is going to be quickest for me. The 7-sentence discussion is also going to be quickest. The lecture videos are going to require me to probably think and process a bit more so that I can be prepared for the quiz. I might have to take some notes, might have to, like, whatever. So I'm going to do that first one first and then the second one next. If I have an essay to do and an exam to do, I'm probably going to do the essay first if it'll be quicker. If the exam is open book, though, I'm going to do the exam first because I can get that done quicker with the help of all my notes or the textbook right in front of me. So you have to learn to prioritize things appropriately and also create a schedule, maybe not an actual schedule, but create a system of working on things at certain times that works for you, getting things that are quick and easy done and out of the way first so that your to-do list isn't super overwhelming to look out consistently. I like to do that, especially when, like last session, I would have like 20 things in my Canvas task list, and once I would immediately start to do all those quick assignments from different subjects first so that I could get that out of the way, get the mental load and like anxiety of that out, and I would have just those like big core things I would have to focus on, and that's what worked for me to get things done quicker. Again, I was at the point where when you're in an accelerated course and you're working full-time, you kind of just get to a point where you're doing things for the grade, you're doing things for the sake of just getting it done and doing well in it. So that's how I do it. I use my time the way I can. If I have to do something at work, I'll do it at work. I don't ever put myself in a position where I have to work on something last minute and it's due today and I'm at work until 11:30 and it's due at 11:59. And actually that doesn't work for me because I'm 1 hour behind or ahead of my school, so I can't do that. So give yourself a buffer. Don't wait until the last minute. Don't try to say that, okay, this is due this day, so I'm going to work on this day, unless you're off that day and you have the full capacity of like the entire day to do it. With that, I also set, like I said, I set my own deadline. So I'm off Thursday and Friday every week. Even if I have no assignments due this week, if I can get started for things that are due next week, I'm doing that. If I have like 48 hours of time, minus sleep, and I tend to sleep in on those days, I am setting the goal for myself that by the end of one day or another or both, I'm doing a set amount of tasks to not have to worry about it the next week. I've had a few times actually over the last session where I would do things for the entire next week, and then the next week I'm just like, I kind of forget I have school because I'd already done all the tasks. And if you're able to work ahead, it's a great way to keep yourself in a constant flow of moving forward and moving ahead of everything else. Like, I get distracted very easily, so for me to say that, that's quite, like, for me, even if I get distracted, if I take breaks that end up being way too long, or I end up watching multiple videos, I have to finally choose to pull myself back and focus. Like, okay, it's, let's say it's 12:09 the next day, and I haven't finished the task I said I would finish yesterday. I am sitting down and I'm getting it done because for me, this was supposed to be due yesterday, and I treat it as if it's an assignment that's late, and I'm doing it right now. There are maybe like 2 or 3 times where I was like, you know what, I'm going to just leave this for tomorrow. I'm tired, and it's just gonna have to be done tomorrow, and then I would have to wake up early or whatever to get it done. And those were cases where, like, it was genuinely something where my brain was not cooperating with me. I couldn't work, I couldn't focus, and it just wasn't going to happen. However, because I also set that buffer for myself, that it wasn't due immediately, it might have been due the next day, and then there's a little bit of rushing, but I didn't put myself in a position where if, I couldn't finish it that day, it wasn't going to be late points, or it wasn't going to be a late assignment. So create your own deadlines, make sure that you're getting things done as early as you can, get into a rhythm of things, and when you have time to do things, use that time. I might be just the loner that doesn't have a life that is able to just work on things anytime I want, but I genuinely, if I have time to do it, if I'm at work and it's not busy, I don't have my iPad with me, I don't have my laptop with me, but I have my phone, I have a charger, I have maybe 10, 15, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and I can get a head start on the next lecture, the next reading, I'm going to do it from my phone if I can. It might not be the most comfortable thing, more often than not, I will focus on like watching my lecture videos from my phone if I don't have any of my other stuff with me, and that way I can at least get a head start. If I can take a quiz from my phone, not my favorite thing, but if I can, I'll do it. If there's a reading or a video, like sometimes there'll be YouTube videos linked to watch, I'll watch it on my phone. A lot of times I will also respond to discussions from my phone, if it isn't like a weird program or something like that. Or I'll write in my notes app what I would want to say, and then I copy and paste it over when I get home. So just find different ways to like stay proactive. And another thing that I haven't really had to do yet, and I haven't really focused on, I probably should have done it for my cell bio class, is creating flashcards. So I like using Anki. I like the way that it sets you up with spaced repetition, and instead of taking notes, I would highly advise that someone just make flashcards. I did that for like one semester. I don't remember what semester it was. It was like my early college days, and it was like just a study hack I was trying out, where instead of taking notes, I had like the PowerPoint, I would be in class, and I would just write. I was very good at creating questions on the spot that sounded like exam questions, like what is it, the simplest ones, like what is a definition for something, or how do you use this thing? Especially if I thought of those questions to ask the professor, I would write those questions into my Anki and then write the answer when it was answered, or like looking at the lecture notes in a way where you can create questions and making a flashcard for those immediately. It takes a lot of work up front, but I think it takes less work than if you were to write a whole set of notes and then make flashcards after that. And also, it helps you retain the information, or start to retain the information, when you are taking that information right away, forming a question around it, putting it directly into a flashcard maker, and then, you know, any time that you have passive time, you just look at it and review it and review it and review it. I plan on doing that with all the pharmacology information I have that I'm going to be studying over the summer, the anatomy information, using pictures as well in your flashcards, crucial. So those are all things I'm going to be using, because I'm not going to have the capacity every single moment of every single day to pick up a textbook and try to read from it and try to learn new things this way. But with a flashcard system that is spaced repetition, and I can just do it that passively while actively learning, that's like the best way to learn and to study. So although I haven't done it yet, mostly because my classes, again, haven't required me to, many of them, a majority of them, have been open book, not proctored, not requiring active memorization, but that would be like my biggest tip for anyone doing accelerated courses. Instead of going through all the fluff of creating notes, if you have to create diagrams, definitely do that and include them in your flashcards. If you have to, you know, if you're a visual learner that learns through like maybe drawing things, kinesthetic learner learns through drawing things, then do that and then include it into a flashcard system, or whatever passive way you can learn, maybe auditory, creating audio recordings, but do what you need to do to make learning quick and efficient for you. I don't necessarily plan on creating like audio modules. I might look for like podcasts or videos I can listen to without having my screen on for things. If I really feel like it's necessary, I will make an audio recording of me talking about whatever topic it is, and then I'll listen to it throughout work, because I always have an earbud in. That's a really good way to do that as well. I just personally, like, auditory doesn't always work for me. When it works for me really well, and that's usually through like listening over and over and over again. But if I zone out for even a moment, I'm lost. So auditory is not the best situation for me. It's not going to be the thing where and especially if you're in a situation where people are constantly going to be interrupting you or talking to you, like I just don't want, and you don't want to draw attention to you having an earbud in. That's not going to be my first way to do it. However, if there's a time where I can just have my phone out and just be going through Anki cards, I'd rather do that. So yeah, those are all my tips, especially, I mean, I just said this, but if you are in a class where you have exams every week, quizzes every week, make exam questions on the spot. How do you do that? Maybe what I just said. Whether you have like a computer and an iPad, maybe you have your iPad and you have split screen, have your notes open in one, have your whatever flashcard system you have in the other, type out questions. Again, it can be as simple as definition of like anatomy, definition of a physiology, definition of kinesthesiology, definition of this, and then answering it. But if you can later on, maybe if you have time, when you have time, form it into an exam question, like describe the parts of you know, the heart, describe the chambers of the heart and their functions. Okay, that is a open-ended question that requires you to think and process. I think one of my major mistakes of making flashcards early on was trying to put too much information into a flashcard. I wish I had things to show you, but because a lot of my materials from me actively studying were from so long ago, I don't have them. I've moved like 3 or 4 times since then. I have deleted a lot of like the cloud storage and stuff that I had back then. So all that stuff is gone. I don't have it anymore, unfortunately. I don't have the written notes I had. I don't have my notes that I had on my iPad anymore. But just like make it as simple and as quick to learn as you possibly can. Don't make it I used to be in love with the aesthetic of writing super beautiful notes and, you know, highlighting everything, color coordinating everything, and I still love it. I find it so freaking cute and amazing, and if I had all the time in the world and I didn't have a job to go to and, you know, I was maybe trying to more actively learn, maybe I would do that. But even then, just from a time standpoint, it doesn't make sense. If you approach everything from a test mindset, a test taker mindset, and you're creating exam questions, like, once you've taken an exam, you know how to form the questions. People think it's super hard, but, you know, it doesn't have to be something super advanced. It doesn't. A lot of times, the questions that may look super intense are really just questions asking you to define something. And if you know how to define it, you know how to answer the question. Or if it's a problem that they're giving you, it's requiring you to know the basic setup of something. It may not work for like physics or like formula-based classes unless you absolutely have to memorize those formulas. But yeah, just make your learning as streamlined as possible and try not to overcomplicate it. Try not to create super elaborate systems that you need multiple apps for, or you need multiple notebooks or systems for, because it just doesn't make sense. I think the biggest way for me to stay focused on anything is to not have systems that are overcomplicated. I've tried Notion, I've tried like a lot of different apps, and I think they're really cool, but I also find like I have all Apple products. This is not me promoting Apple, but I got that pretty early on because I like the way that they synced with each other. I like that I can just like drag and drop things to devices. I like that I can just airdrop things to devices, and if I save things in my iCloud, I can open it in the next thing. If I open a note here, I can open it on my phone, and so I use that to my advantage. And there goes my light. I use that to my advantage, and I just make sure that I keep everything as simple as possible. That is my biggest thing. Keep things as simple as possible. If I were to go back to last semester and like I was trying to do like study guides, I was trying to do all these things, but I simply didn't have time for it. And if I had just done like flashcards, I would have been done with studying so much quicker, so much easier. But yeah, I've been rambling for so long. I hope this helps someone. It might not, but that's how I've succeeded in school thus far.